guys. Welcome to Life is Beautiful. Yeah, this is where like the whole room cheers and goes crazy. Welcome to Life is Beautiful. So Shepard Fairey, was a last-minute addition, and when we found out there was an opportunity for him to speak, I pretty much told the whole team, we're doing whatever it takes. I dropped everything, and I was like, I'm going to make this happen myself, because I think right before a very important election, Nevada being a swing state, having Shepard Fairey on stage to talk about his artistic genius is pretty unbelievable. So thank you so much for coming. We are so, so grateful to have you.
Thank you, Amanda. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, round of applause. Who's seen Shepard's work right down the street so far? Yeah, pretty amazing. So I wanted to start off, we have a different theme each day. This day is around personal transformation. I wanted to start off and just talk to you kind of about, the work that you've done in Vegas. How has this city influenced your art? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I would say that, Vegas, any big urban area, I'm wanting to put my work in front of people where they live, not just making them go to a gallery or a museum. I think that those things are great. They serve their purpose, but I think art needs to be more democratic. So, I have an interesting history with Vegas. My wife's grandmother lived here before she passed away, and now my in-laws live here. So I avoid it mostly. But the funny thing, the Magic Trade Show, for years, I've done clothing, and when I first made T-shirts, it was basically just to subsidize my street art, and I had to pay for it somehow. You spend money doing street art, so I started just screen printing T-shirts myself, and eventually, as I got a little bit more, got it together a bit more, I started doing the Magic Trade Show. So I'd always come here. And when I would come a few days early to stay with my wife's grandmother, and then go out and put a lot of posters up, it's a fun process. I really enjoy it, and I mean Vegas is, people think of the Strip, but there's so many different interesting areas. Downtown Vegas at that point in the late '90s, early 2000s was it was pretty run down, but that means that there were opportunities to put posters on boarded up windows and things like that. So, I had a love of downtown Vegas, but in 2005 I was arrested here, and so I've kind of laid low a little more in Vegas. I was on probation here for a while, but I'm still back. But it's incredible what this festival has got going on. Life is Beautiful. I always look at what's going on with my friends, my peers from street art and graffiti on the internet, but it's a big difference to see things in person. And coming here, getting a tour, from Charlotte, who's helping to curate the art side.
Woo's right.
Yeah, she's here. I really got to see just how amazing the caliber of the art is, and just how it transforms the whole area. Obviously, I'm very biased towards liking that sort of thing, but there's some really, really strong art, and I think that for Vegas to be able to shake its reputation as kind of a cultural vacuum, and the Cliff Notes version of the drunk version of New York City, the drunk version of Venice, Italy, the drunk version of wherever, and actually have this festival that's, I think, really fantastic culturally, not elitist, but it's really high level of good quality music and art. That's fantastic, so I'm really proud to be part of it.
Yes, coming from you, that's a big deal, so thank you for that. Yeah, it's great. So knowing that there is a legal risk in creating art on the street, as you just mentioned, you were arrested, how do you balance your career and the creativity with the art, knowing that there is that legal risk?
Well, I'm in an interesting zone, because I come from street art and graffiti and skateboarding and punk rock, all things that are very, very, very outsider. They're about do-it-yourself empowerment. But I also believe that there can be an outsider elitism in those cultures that can be really obnoxious and annoying. And so what I'm trying to balance is, I think that the spirit of making things happen on your own terms outside of the system, but also understanding that when there are opportunities to infiltrate the system and subversively change it from the inside, that you'd be foolish not to do that. So I employ what I call the inside-outside strategy. Work outside the system when that's necessary, and get in there, and before they know it, bam, I've flipped something about it, right under their noses.
They don't even realize.
And then it's too late. So,
awesome.
I mean, that can be challenging. I catch a lot of flack from both sides. A friend of mine who's a curator said that I'm too street for the corporate and too corporate for the street. But as long as I'm a thorn in someone's side,
that's all that matters.
That's part of it. But it's I have a family also. I'm married. I have 2 kids. My kids love putting stickers up, which is pretty awesome. But balancing all of that is tough. But the one thing about having kids that I think has affected my work that some people might notice, you can see in some of this stuff, the Statue of Liberty, with the sea level rising. I'm thinking about not just my image and my short-term concerns, but maybe a little more selflessly about the future generations and the planet they're going to inherit. So it's not, it's not that I made a transformation from being a completely narcissistic, self-absorbed person to some sort of saint. I'm still a blend of the two. But yeah, having a family I think has helped me to balance more shallow aesthetic concerns about the kind of images I make, and and then thinking about the future and what it means to be connected to to all of humanity.
Yeah, wow. And speaking about skate and punk culture, it's had a big role in your life. And again, going around this idea of self-transformation, these big movements like Life is Beautiful has a direct impact on people's identity. So very curious, how has skate and punk culture transformed you as an individual, before and now?
Well, I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, which is very conservative. I went to the same high school and grade school that Stephen Colbert went to. And as soon as I found that out, he's 6 years older than I am. I didn't even know that we'd gone to school together until I became such a big fan of his show. But I knew 100% that his persona was a product of that terrible, shitty conservative school. So, I had that experience. And my mom was head cheerleader and my dad was captain of the football team. Wow. I was pretty screwed. I discovered skateboarding and punk rock right when I was about to turn 14, and that just opened my world up, because skateboarding was, it was very visceral and physical, but it wasn't a jock sport. And then it came with, at the time, punk rock music like the Dead Kennedys, Bad Brains, Black Flag, the Sex Pistols, the Clash, and that turned me on to Minor Threat. That turned me on to this aggressive music, but also the political lyrics of that music. I mean, I started to question Ronald Reagan's presidency because of Jello Biafra's deconstruction of Reagan's foreign policy. Also, that culture, skateboarding and punk rock, were very much about, sort of create your own scene, your own tribe, make your own graphics. I started making homemade T-shirts, cutting paper cut stencils and screen printing and stenciling with spray paint then. And even though I saw that as recreational and a way just to make T-shirts that I couldn't buy anywhere in South Carolina. You'd have to go to Boston or New York to get a Sex Pistols T-shirt. So I just make it in South Carolina. But it was part of my evolution towards seeing the value in this kind of art, because I grew up drawing and painting in a very traditional way, still lives and seascapes. And, my dad said, if you really make it, son, you'll get to do the state duck stamp.
Not the Hope Obama, not the Hope Obama poster, the state duck stamp.
The state duck stamp. But later on, I would, of course, see the connection to Barbara Kruger, Andy Warhol, Lichtenstein, Rauschenberg, in some of the very same techniques I was using that were inspired by punk rock. And Jamie Reed, who did the Sex Pistols graphics, or Raymond Pettibone, who did the art for Black Flag, they're celebrated fine artists. So it made me think that I can pursue what I think is important culturally and politically and still be taken seriously as an artist at some point.
Absolutely.
Eventually.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you didn't get the duck stamp, but I
Right,
think
right,
you got a lot
right.
more. So just knowing that we don't have a ton of more time, I'd love to ask you two more questions. So you keep talking kind of about your role as you are a social activist. Without coining yourself a social activist, you really do care about making changes in the world. So, how do you take on this role of social activist? How does it integrate into your art and you as an individual?
Well, first and foremost, I think that making a compelling picture is what's most important for an artist. But I follow the model of people, more musicians than artists, even though there are artists. Banksy, Barbara Kruger, Rauschenberg did the first Earth Day poster. There are visual artists, but my heroes for the most part are people like Bob Marley, Johnny Cash, Public Enemy, Rage Against the Machine. These are the Clash. These are all people who used their art to say something, but the music itself had an immediate appeal. So you're breaking through potential intellectual predispositions by making art that affects people emotionally. So my goal is to solve that problem of making a picture that I think is strong, but also making someone hopefully ponder something that they might reject otherwise or not think about otherwise.
Absolutely. And going actually to the next question, your art is very powerful and obviously has gained a humongous following, but do you have a story of an individual that kind of, obviously you might have a few, but of anyone that's personally been transformed by your work and has told you that this really transformed my perspective? I guess you have a good one based on that smile, but.
Well, I mean, it's very humbling how many really talented people tell me how much their work has meant to me. One of my favorite artists right now is a guy named Vils, Vhils, who's from Lisbon, Portugal. He's a young guy. He might not even be 30 yet, but he's already been busy on the street chiseling out images with a jackhammer and cutting through advertising poster walls where there are layers and layers of posters, and he cuts away and reveals different imagery by peeling away to what's underneath. But he told me that I was one of his biggest influences, and that's really exciting for me because I think the work that he's doing is really beautiful, but it's also provocative because it is simultaneously creation and destruction. And to me, not to get too deep, but that's kind of a metaphor for life,
Reality.
So there are any number of stories. I'm really amazed by how many people say my work inspired them, and there are plenty of people who say my work ired them. So, but yeah, it's usually the people that I talk to, they talk about making a transformation from seeing my work. They say they were at first irritated by it, and then that made them. Then when they learned more about it, their irritation was something they started to feel ashamed of because fear of the unknown is something that I think is in all of us. And that was part of my concept with Obey was the most pervasive form of propaganda in American society is advertising. And that is usually something that's potentially sinister in a benevolent package, and what I wanted to make was something that was benevolent in a sinister package to get people to question whether what you see on the surface is what is truly behind something that you all the visuals you encounter, what the real agenda is. Yeah, exactly.
And what ideas, or I guess what do you want people to think, to feel? Obviously, again, with art, everyone has their own experience. But when you paint something, is there an immediate kind of visceral reaction where I wish people felt X, Y, and Z?
No, I mean, the great thing about art is the latitude for interpretation. So even though I have specific ideas behind my work, I always think that there's some value to the Rorschach test component, that each person interprets the ink blot differently, and it says something about them. My hope is that as a visual communicator, I've put some cues in there that are fairly universal. Sometimes people say to me Shepard's work, it uses this or that, everybody's seen this or that, but that's, some artists are trying to create something that they think no one's ever seen before. What I'm trying to do is use a universal language of imagery, but present it in a way that's very unique to me. So it's not something no one's ever seen before, imagery-wise, but it's maybe something that no one's ever seen before in exactly that way, and making my style recognizable. So, one of the things that, because art's always been about empowerment for me, to see people react to my work and say, okay, now I see how I could maybe apply some of these principles to something that I care about, that's meaningful to me. That it's a template for empowerment that anyone can apply in their own way. That's exciting.
Wow. Well, we're out of time, but go experience his art, get inspired, get ignited. That's what Life is Beautiful is about. Thank you so much for coming. We are so grateful. And thank you guys for attending this
Thank
talk.
you.
Awesome. Thank you. Great.
Thanks a lot.